they're in full swing now down in Florida. The Mets had their first workout yesterday. The Yankees pitchers and catchers reported yesterday, and not the workout with the position players, but with some of the young players and the pitchers and throwing BP and stuff like that. And the Yankees are having their first workout today. And so I was thinking today, what are the most important players on both teams that have to do what they have to do? Because when you put together a team, like if you put together the New York Yankees, you got to expect that Aaron Judge is going to give you an 8, 9, or 10 WAR. And if he doesn't, then you got problems. Everything else plays off of that. So there's certain players that you have to just assume are going to give you their usual performance. And if they exceed that, that's great, and it gives you some wiggle room. And if they don't exceed it and they come below it, then somebody has to pick it up. But if they completely, miss the mark by a lot, then you're in trouble. So, with the Mets, you got Juan Soto. You expect him to give you a certain amount of production. With the Yankees, you have Aaron Judge. You expect him to give you a certain amount of production. And if it doesn't happen, then you've got issues. Cool. Okay. These are the guys that I think are mega important for both teams. I came up with 2 for both. So we'll start with the Mets. Francisco Alvarez, to me, is a guy who has to rebound from what he did last year offensively. I mean, I looked at this guy and I said, this guy's going to be a catcher for 10 years who hits 25 to 30 home runs every single year. And last year, he really didn't play well. I think he hit like 235 in that general vicinity. And even he said he had to work on certain things during the offseason. He was not the offensive player that the Mets thought that he was going to get. Now, he might be, like Pete Alonso, one of these guys who's going to regret turning down that long-term offer from the Mets. Maybe he rebounds. But I think the Mets need him to have a big-time year, because if he doesn't, then all of a sudden their offense is a little bit shorter than they want it to be. If Alvarez becomes the player that he was a couple of years ago offensively, all of a sudden their offense is really, really potent. So that's player number 1 for the Mets that I think is hugely important, a big variable for them. Player number 2 is Senga. He pitched 5 innings last year. Now, his first year with the Mets, he was terrific. Then the shoulder issue, he comes back, he pitches 5 innings, and then he has the calf issue. He did come back and pitch in the playoffs, which is more than anybody thought he was going to do, but he pitched over a 12 ERA in the playoffs. He's their number 1 starter. So if he's not your number 1 starter and doesn't pitch like your number 1 starter, you've got issues. Then all of a sudden, Sean Manaea has to be your number 1 starter. There's no more Luis Severino. He was overpaid by the A's. And then there's a lot of pressure on Frankie Montas and David Peterson. So the Mets have question marks in their starting staff, but everything is a little less pressurized if Kodai Senga gives them 28 healthy starts with that ghost fork, the whole deal. Those 2 guys, to me, are the variables for the Mets. Senga pitching like a number 1 starter completely solves their biggest question mark. That's how big he is. Can he do it? Yeah, if he's healthy, he could do it. But it came to light that when the Mets signed him into that contract, there were teams that had concerns about his shoulder. And I always get worried when you sign pitchers from Japan, because here in the States, we baby pitchers. We don't let them pitch 4 or 5 innings in the minors. They don't get built up. I mean, it's a very exact science. You can't put too many innings on their arms. In Japan, they start throwing in an inordinate amount of innings right from the time they're kids. So they believe you got to really work and throw a lot in order to be successful. And you take a look at the Japanese pitchers that have come to the States, they've had issues. Tanaka, 4 or 5 starts in for the Yankees, a UCL injury. Now, he never needed surgery, but after that UCL injury, although he was a very, very good Yankee pitcher, he was never the great pitcher they thought he was going to be. And I remember I asked Brian Cashman, I said, why are you not concerned with all the innings that Japanese pitchers throw in Japan, but you're so concerned about your teams in the minor leagues not using pitchers a lot of, and he just said, well, it's a different culture. I get it, but it still comes back to bite you. Same thing with Senga. Last year, although they won a championship, Dodgers spent all this money on Yamamoto. He missed a lot of the season with a shoulder injury. We'll see if that's the same issue with Suzuki. So the Mets have a lot riding on Kodai Senga. So those are my two big wild cards for the Mets. Now for the Yanks. Listen, the easy one is the third base situation. And you still have to convince me that that's what the Yankees are going into the season with. You still have to. You got to prove it to me that you're willing to go into the season with DJ LeMahieu, Oswaldo Cabrera, Oswald Peraza, or Yorvit Vivas. You got to prove it to me. I keep saying it. I don't want to sound like a broken record. It has a lot of that Bubba Crosby feel to it. Bubba Crosby's going to be our center fielder. Bubba Crosby's going to be our center fielder. For you younger Yankee fans, look it up. Right before the season began, right in the middle of spring training, they signed Johnny Damon. So maybe they're just waiting for prices to come down. Maybe they got to move there. They have to bring the payroll underneath the final threshold. I don't know. I'd be stunned. And I know they have $30 million still to pay DJ LeMahieu, but you can't throw good money after bad by having DJ LeMahieu shoehorned into third base when he's not the player that he once was. We'll see. Aaron Boone said yesterday he's had a lot of injuries. Even when he was healthy, he struggled. Let's all be honest with each other. So third base is the easy one. But the most important player for the Yankees, to me, for their ultimate success, is Jason Dominguez. They've been waiting a long time. Signed this guy when he was 16. Burst upon the scene in his first at-bat against Verlander with a home run in Houston. There's a lot to like about him. And Aaron Boone has always been a big proponent that this guy's not just a good player, he's going to be an absolute star. He has told me that privately, too. And he says the same thing publicly. So he's not just like putting lipstick on a pig because it's a Yankee prospect. Boone loves him. Now, I think they're making a mistake by playing him in left field. I said that yesterday, so I don't need to repeat myself. I say this guy's so important, you put him in center field where he's comfortable, where he's played most of his minor league career, and let Bellinger play left. But they're going to see what happens in spring training. They have a long runway. That's their verbiage. And they can see exactly where he's going to be comfortable. But he wasn't bad in left field last year. He was dreadful. Dreadful. Didn't seem like he read the ball well off the bat. The Yankees desperately wanted him to be their starting left fielder in the postseason. But he was so poor defensively in left that they had to go with Verdugo because they could not afford to give out outs in big games. If Jason Dominguez is not the player that the Yankees think, they're in trouble. Because the only fallback that the Yankees have is Trent Grisham. And unlike the Yankees, I am not all in on Trent Grisham. He's a strikeout machine. He does hit home runs. He's going to be one of those guys who hits 200, 198, something like that. Might run into 22 home runs. And he's a good defender. To me, he's an imperfect player. He's so far from a perfect player. So that's your fallback if Dominguez does not do it. I mean, what do you have in the minor leagues? Everson Pereira? Spencer Jones is not ready to play in the majors yet. Dominguez is so important that if something happens to him in spring training and he doesn't produce, they might have to swallow hard and bring back Alex Verdugo, who still hasn't signed with the team. So much is riding on this 22-year-old. They have to be right with him. He's got to be the player that they always thought he was going to be, both production-wise and health-wise. That's one of the things he has not been able to do. He can't stay healthy. All right, time for you to co-host 1-800-919-3776, 1-800-919-3776. Where are you? Let's go to Lake in Spokane. What's up, Lake?
Hi, Michael. Thanks for taking my call. I have two quick questions for you. I've been seeing some stuff today about Ben. I mean, obviously Ben Rice showed up with pitchers and catchers that, he's going to be competing for that backup catcher spot as well as some first base flexibility. One, do you think that there is a path for Ben Rice to get on this roster without being that backup catcher? Because it feels like there's a lot of other guys on this roster that would start ahead of him for first base. And then secondly, are there any prospects this year that haven't made a debut that maybe we as fans should be watching in the minors that maybe end of this year, next year, something like that, could be competing for a roster spot? So thanks for taking my call.
You got it. The Ben Rice thing is interesting, Lake. If he's your backup catcher, now one of the knocks on Ben Rice is he can hit, but he's not a good defender. But before you read too much into that, that was the same knock on Austin Wells. And Austin Wells has turned into a plus defender, a really good framer of pitchers, the whole deal. But do you want to have your backup catcher also be left-handed like your starting catcher? I guess you can live with it. It's not ideal, but you can live with it. In terms of backing up at first base, I think the only way he makes the roster is if he is, in fact, the backup catcher, and then he could also back up Goldschmidt at first base. I don't think you make the team simply as a backup first baseman. You just don't. I don't think that's the proper use of a roster spot. I mean, your backup first baseman could be Oswaldo Cabrera. Switch hitter, can play over there, can play any infield position, can play the outfield as well. That's the key. Now, in terms of players that you haven't seen yet, Vivas, to me, he's intriguing. He had a very good spring training last year. He's yet to play in the big leagues. They got him from the Dodgers in the Trey Sweeney deal. I like him. He's got some pop. He's somebody that you could see in the big leagues this year, and the rest are pitchers. I don't think there's any position player that's ready to make his debut. I think Spencer Jones is still not there. George Lombard Jr. is still not there. So I would take a look at Vivas and some of the young pitchers. But this is a set team. This is somewhat of a set roster. It's going to be interesting to do what they do with Peraza, because he's out of options. So if they try to send him down, they'll lose him. So either he's going to make the team or they're going to trade him. And I don't see a real path for him making the team unless somebody gets hurt. He has not hit the way they thought he was going to hit. He could field with anybody, but he has not hit. 1-800-919-3776. Jonathan in L.A. Jonathan.
Hi, Michael.
Hi, Jonathan.
Hi, Michael. So last year, Garrett Cole started off the year, obviously, in the injury list. It was close to him having Tommy John surgery. So, Michael, I wanted to ask you, so what happened with that? Is that there's a chance that could actually come back and haunt him, or that's already done with?
Well, he really was not close to Tommy John surgery. I mean, you hear elbow, so you get nervous and you think Tommy John surgery, but that was never something that was close to being considered. He had a nerve irritation. The irritation went down, and he pitched in the second half. But it does tell you something, because remember, when he opted out, all the Yankees had to do was put that 10th year at $36 million, and he would not have been a free agent. And you know what the Yankees said? No. If you want to become a free agent, be a free agent. So they know his medical's better than anybody. The guy's getting older. I don't know if there's going to be more problems there. The Yankees know that better than anybody. They did not give him that 10th year when they had the opportunity for him not to be a free agent. So they called his bluff. And to Garrett Cole's credit, he said, no, I don't want to be a free agent. I want to stay here. So he has 4 years left on his deal. I think he's a brilliant pitcher. And as long as he could throw a ball, even if he loses something velocity-wise off his fastball, he's so smart. He'll find a way to get it done. He will find a way to get it done. That's just how good he is. But I think he goes into spring training this year without any worries. Health-wise, he's supposed to be fine. We'll see. But it does always worry me when you have something wrong with you, and then it never really gets fixed. Instead, you rest it and it gets better. Is it going to rear its ugly head again? There's a lot of innings in that arm. A lot of innings in that arm. 1-800-919-3776. Hector in Queens. Hector.
Hey, Michael.
How you doing,
so
Hector?
I just want to touch on the St. John's and UConn thing. I'm a huge UConn fan. Growing up as a kid, I always wanted to root for St. John's, but they were just always so terrible. And so I just gravitated to UConn, seeing as it is a Big East school. It's interesting now. I'm not gonna root against UConn, but I'll definitely root for St. John's because I am a New York City kid. It's interesting now that they're gonna play in MSG, and every time we play in MSG, it's always a UConn crowd. I want to see how much it shifts, you know what I mean, in that game. That's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, I think that, and they have a game coming up in Madison Square Garden, and I think that it'll be pro St. John's. I mean, Pitino has turned it around such that he's using Madison Square Garden as a real positive and also a recruiting tool. So I think in the past, because St. John's has been so bad for so long, that UConn fans were able to get their hands on tickets. St. John's, there was no clamor for them to go see the game. But I think when UConn plays St. John's at Madison Square Garden, it's going to be a pro St. John's crowd. I think by a lot. Let's go to Jerry in Manhattan. Jerry.
Hey, Michael, how you doing?
Good. How are you doing, Jerry?
Good. I was really surprised. I was going to talk about the Yankees, but last week you were talking about Alonso. Like, that was a bad deal on a one-year deal. I didn't understand that. This is a guy, I think in his last 5 years, only Judge has had more home runs than him. He averaged 120. And if you're getting a guy like Juan Soto there, who's going to be bringing him in? A guy who's on base 400 on base percentage, who's going to be your big run producer? I really didn't understand your take. It sounded like more like an anti-Met take because of a one-year deal.
Did you hear the entire thing I said, Jerry? Or did you just see
I heard the entire thing. You were talking about...
Okay, so what I said was the Mets won by getting him on a one-year deal. That was the best thing that they could possibly get. They lost by paying him $30 million for that 1 year when they valued him at $22.5 to $23 million. So what they did was they swallowed hard, and Steve Cohen said, okay, I'll pay him way above market value to get him for that 1 year. I didn't say it was a bad deal. I said it was an overpay.
Yeah, but $8 million, you're making a big deal for 1 year?
So $8 million is not a big deal. So if it stops, you know that $8 million, right, is $16 million because they're at 110% tax.
I think it's just overreaction, like for his production, how he's produced.
He didn't have. 5 years. Are you a Met fan, Jerry?
No, I'm a Yankee fan, but
okay. So his production last year. Do you know what his OPS was last year? 788. 788, the worst of his career. 35 home runs. This is a guy who used to hit 40 and 50 home runs. So he's on the downside.
Can you tell me that could be one bad, mediocre season, but tell me one player that has averaged more home runs or more RBIs in the last 5 years. You're not going to find too much players there.
But what happened? What happened last year, Jerry? 788 OPS.
That's why you give him a 1 year deal, Michael.
And that's why I said the 1 year deal was a positive thing. Did you hear what I said? But the $30 million is too much. I'm not saying they shouldn't have done it. They're overpaying him the $30 million.
How much did Christian Walker get? How much did Santander get? That's not an overpay when his last 4 or 5 years.
Christian Walker makes $22 million a year.
Okay, but who's had the better career or the better?
But okay, so Jerry, since you're in the mood to argue, what offers did Alonso have? Anybody could have signed him. What offers did he have?
Didn't he had a bigger offer from the Mets that he turned down early on?
He signed with the Mets.
Yeah, but in the beginning stage, you know what I'm talking about, Michael.
That was 2 years ago. That was 2 years ago for a different GM.
This offseason, didn't they offer him more money and he rejected the deal? And the Blue Jays, weren't the Blue Jays offering more money?
No, we don't know what the Blue Jays offered him.
So there was no market for him at all.
Obviously not. He came back to the Mets, right? He wanted the $30 million for 1 year. There was not a great market for him because he maybe didn't want to play in Toronto and he didn't want to play for the Angels. Those are the teams that we heard about. For a guy who's one of the great home run hitters over the last 5 years, as you keep bringing up, the bottom line is there was not this vast, robust market that everybody thought there was going to be. There just wasn't. There's a guy who turned down 7 years at 158 2 years ago when Billy Epper was the GM. He's not even close to getting that. Not even close to getting it. So, I mean, what are we talking about? The biggest offer the Mets supposedly out there was 3 years at 68 to 70 million bucks. That's what they valued him at, about 22 to 23 million. I give them credit. They overpaid for him for just 1 year, and also they helped him save face. So he comes back to the Mets on essentially a 1 year deal, and he could say, and his agent could say, we got him the highest average annual value of any first baseman in history other than Miguel Cabrera. But it's 1 year. That's where the Mets won. 1 year. You know where they lost? They overpaid him. But that's Steve Cohen, and he has the money. If you're going to make a mistake with the Mets, you make a mistake the money-wise. It doesn't matter to him. He's got $22 billion personal fortune. But to say, well, he's had more home runs in the last 5 years, he didn't have a good year last year. He had a great postseason. He didn't have a great year. That market that he thought was going to be out there, he was looking for like Aaron Judge money. It didn't materialize. First basemen don't get that kind of money. Not in their 30s, and certainly not from David Stearns, the Mets GM. He doesn't believe in it. He simply doesn't believe in it. I mean, what's he arguing about? If you listen to the whole thing, I said the Mets got a great deal for 1 year. They got a bad deal having to pay him $30 million. Well, how are you arguing with me? Freddie Freeman makes less. Matt Olson makes less. So tell me, who's better? Freddie Freeman, who's going to the Hall of Fame? Matt Olson? Who's a better first baseman? And they make much less than this guy. Where's your argument? I don't get it. The guy was worth more to the Mets than any other team in baseball. And the Mets would not give him a long-term offer. They refused. So again, all you people that are defending the signing, where's your argument? Again, you're not listening to what I'm saying. 1 year, great, very smart. $30 million, not great, overpay. So forget him for 1 year, you overpaid him, and Steve Cohen doesn't care. He's got that money in coins in his ashtray. $7-8 million, who cares? But the proper valuation of this player, according to the Mets GM, was $23 million a year. That's it. Argue with them. Don't argue with me. Argue with them. Don't argue with me.